Thank you for joining us today. My name's Betty Brewer. It's my privilege to serve as president and CEO here at Minnetrista. And a group of us were trying to remember how long we had been doing this, and we agreed that it was 4 years. But Rebecca Gill, you brought this idea to Muncie. Is this year 4? Yes. All right, this is year 4, so we got it right. You know, the first time this came up, I was just not sure how. I couldn't visualize it. I mean, I saw pictures, you know, and that's fine, but it doesn't really tell you what it's all about, you know. So we talked about it, and we thought, well, it seems like a really good idea. It seems like the right thing to do. Let's give this a shot and see what happens. And I don't know about the folks in Exchange, but I was amazed and absolutely thrilled about the results from that first year. Every year it's just gotten better. And I keep thinking, can it keep getting better every year? You know, how long is this going to last? Does it have legs, as they say in theater? Well, you know, thinking about that and honoring the men and women who protect us, whether it's our safety or our freedoms, whether they're in the military or in public service, with the police department, with the fire department, ambulance service, all of those folks that work on our behalf day in, day out, and make incredible sacrifices. Just doesn't get old, folks. Honoring those folks does not get old. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have a great program for you, and I now get the honor of introducing David McGalliard, the current president of the Exchange Club, who will be our master of ceremonies for the day. Thank you.
If I talk loud, can you hear me in the back?
You're a teacher, aren't you?
I was. I went through NCO school and had to march troops, so I can do this. I would like for you to please understand a little bit about the Muncie Exchange Club. We are a non-for-profit organization. We have goals that we attempt to meet. We meet some better than others, but we definitely know how to do the patriotism. How'd that happen?
Your magic.
Yes, we have an extraordinary challenge in community service, youth programs, promoting Americanism, and fighting child abuse. That's what we try to do. And if I look familiar to some of you last year, it was only a year ago that I was speaking at the closing ceremony. And I was so taken by the values of this organization that my wife and I decided we had to be a part of it. And it's only by a series of misadventures that I stand before you today as president. I've now been drafted twice in my life. The Flags of Honor is an Exchange Club project with the goal of having our local communities, citizens recognized as the patriots that they are. Whether they be living or dead, military veterans or civilians, we are all about recognizing those people. Would you please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Delaware County Honor Guard with Bugler Joel Replogle. Would you please remain standing? We are going to have Chief Steve Stewart lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now, if Harold Clay would, please lead us in our invocation.
Our gracious Lord, we are thankful today for the opportunity to celebrate the lives of people who have given themselves for patriotism and for our freedom. We thank you today that we can celebrate and we can lift you up through our lives and through the lives of others. Would you bless our time together and bless this week as we lift up the names of those who have gone before us, who have paved the way for our freedom. Bless, we pray, this day, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the national anthem, as performed by the Expressions Quartet, James Pyle, James Sauter, John Kruger, and Ned Klein.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare above bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
You may be seated. I would like to introduce our special guest today, Sherry Riggins. Would you please stand? She's our county commissioner. And let's see, who else do we have here? We have Randy Rouse, state commander. There he is, back there, and vets, right? And Mike Blackwell, state adjutant. Thank you for being here today. Let's give them a round of applause. At this time, could I have all Exchange Club members please stand? These are the people involved in getting those flags out there and performing the duties that are required to get such things done. If you are capable as a veteran, would you please stand? I need all veterans to stand. At this time, we remember the recently deceased members of Exchange Club. Bob Bauer, Monty Needler, and Kenneth Siever. And now, we will have America the Beautiful and Back Home Again in Indiana, performed by the Expressions Quartet.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriot's dream that seems beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea, from sea to shining sea. I have always been a wanderer over land and sea, yet a moonbeam on the water casts a spell o'er me. Visions fair I see, again I seem to be back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see the gleaming candlelight still shining, shining bright through the sycamores for me, for me. The new moon hastens all its fragrance from the fields I used to roam. When I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash, then I long for my Indiana home. When I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash, then I long for my Indiana home. My home. Thank you.
I wish I could do that. You don't want to hear me sing. Our speaker for today is Dr. William G. Edson. He's a native of Illinois. We were lucky enough to get him over here. He has a PhD from Vanderbilt University and taught history at Ball State from 1966 to 2001. He's been chairman of the History Department for 4 years, associate dean of the Colleges of Science and Humanities for 5 years, the author of 2 books, and Bob Rector happened to coach, Bob's back there, he's one of us, happened to coach 2 of his sons at Northside. So at this time, would you please welcome Dr. Edson.
I just threw that rector comment in, Bob. I thought you might like to know that anyway. So he did. Erroneously the other day, though, said he had 9 parents who were coaches. I did not help him coach. I never criticized you once. Bet you could hear me anyway. So, isn't this beautiful out here? It's almost breathtaking, isn't it? Did you have anything to do with setting up the flags today? Any of you? Any of you set the flags up today? You have my permission to sleep during this talk. I mean, 10 o'clock this morning, what you're working all morning probably. It's beautiful, and it's going to last for a week. Now, probably most of you think of that we should be honoring, or you intend to be honoring, people you know, or people in our lifetime, or a decade or 2 before. But I want to talk about somebody else. I want to talk about people who lived in this county 150 years ago. People who lived here during the Civil War. And if I do my job right, I think you'll know why I want us to honor those people from the Civil War time. When the war began, Delaware County had no cities. It had 12 townships, population of slightly less than 18,000. And when Fort Sumter fell, Lincoln immediately called for 75,000 state militiamen to put down the insurrection. That was April 15th. The next day, we had a company formed in this county. 24 hours, we raised a company of 75 men and 3 officers who were volunteered to serve in this war. 2 days later, after the band played and after the crowd cheered, they got on a train, went to Indianapolis, and were mustered in. Altogether, before it's over with, this Muncie, sorry, it was not Muncie, Muncie wasn't a town yet, Delaware County raised 2,000 soldiers out of a population of 18,000. That's 1 out of every 9 served in the Civil War. And they served in 19 different regiments, and those regiments fought in virtually every major battle of the Civil War. They fought at Shiloh and at Vicksburg. They were at Chickamauga and Chattanooga. They were in the Atlanta campaign. They were at Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Second Manassas, Antietam, and at Gettysburg. At Gettysburg, 3 of the companies served as 30% of the 19th Regiment. 19th Regiment was part of that famous Iron Brigade. The 19th Regiment suffered 72% casualties, and 30% of that regiment came from this county. Casualties being killed, wounded, and missing. Quite a record for them anyway. Delaware County, the men who served in that regiment, or any of the regiments from Delaware County, tended to be farmers. Well, of course. Some of them owned farms, some of them farm workers. They tended to be single and under the age of 24. So most of the 2,000 were young, single farmers. Or, of course, not all of them, but most of them were anyway. Many of the 2,000 men deserve some special praise, but I just want to mention a couple, if you don't mind. The captain of that first company was named Tom Brady. Not the football player. His father became the first mayor of Muncie when it became a city. Tom Brady was the captain of that company, and he remained in the Civil War throughout the entire war, and when the war was over, his rank was Brigadier General, the only one from this county to have that rank. And then there was John Bloss. John Bloss is the private who found the copy of Lee's orders wrapped around 3 cigars in Maryland, which told the Union that Lee's army was spread all over the place and that the Union army was closer to Lee than part of his army was to Lee. A golden opportunity to crush Lee. But unfortunately, McClellan didn't take advantage of it. John Bloss came back to this county, became superintendent of public instruction, then moved to Oregon, where he was the 3rd president of Oregon Agricultural College, which is now Oregon State University. John Bloss came back to this county and is buried in Beech Grove Cemetery. And then there's William Carson. William Carson received the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was a bugler. Is Jared still here? Mr. Reckbogle is still here? A bugler. Did you know they could get a Congressional Medal of Honor for being a bugler? I'm telling you, that's true. At Chickamauga, he blew the bugle at a crucial time, just as the Confederates were about to charge. It confused them all over the place. It also confused a lot of our Union troops who were about to retreat, and instead of retreating, they marched, they charged, and he got a Congressional Medal for it, except the next day he was captured and spent considerable time in a Confederate prison, and when he got out, he was called the human skeleton. He weighed all of 64 pounds. Now, I'm a bit of a skeptic, you know, historians are that way, and I thought, did we really have a Medal of Honor winner from this county? Well, he's from Ohio. But he lived here after the war, and he's buried in Beech Grove Cemetery, so we're going to claim him anyway. So. Chief Stewart, I found an ancestor of yours.
Oh, great.
Right. His name was Harry Stewart. You know Henry Stewart, I'm sorry. You know him, yeah, right. Right. He was in the Indiana 7th Cavalry and was on maneuvers in Mississippi when he said, I got a slight pop in my shoulder. He got shot in his shoulder, and the bullet went through, came all the way out, missed any major organs, thank goodness for him, and remained in the saddle for another 2 to 3 hours as he rode back to safety. And then a few years later, his nephew said, as nephews can do, Uncle, why were you shot in the back? Because I was running like hell, he said. Well, actually, that's your ancestor, isn't it, right?
We run towards trouble.
Oh, okay. Actually, his unit was in retreat, so it was a very honorable retreat, if you might say, anyway. So, what we don't know about these 2,000 young men who served in the war is how many are more African American. We have no figures that I know of that tell us that. I'm going to say it's pretty few, because the African American population in Delaware County in 1816, 61, and 62 was pretty small. You see, we were not on the Underground Railroad, so a lot of runaway slaves did not come to this county. But Thomas Krebs has written an article about Civil War soldiers who are African American, and he said that there are 28 of them buried in Beech Grove Cemetery. I'll take his word for it, but I don't know. Tom Schnuck, who was a long-time superintendent of Beech Grove, said that there are nearly 600 soldiers in Beech Grove, Civil War soldiers in Beech Grove Cemetery, but he doesn't know how many of them are African American. We also know Thomas Helm, who's written a very nice history of the county, says that there were 365 Civil War soldiers from this county who were killed during the war. 365 killed, nearly 600 buried in the cemetery, if you want, anyway. So, you're right. Well, when the Union needed soldiers, it made a call for troops, and they did this several times during the war, usually for several 100,000. And then there would be a certain number that each state was supposed to raise, and then each state would parcel it out to each county. And whenever the Union government called for 300,000 troops, which it did more than one time, Delaware County's quota was 194. Now, if you reach your quota by volunteers, you didn't draft. If you didn't reach your quota by volunteers, you had to draft. I'm happy to say that Delaware County never had to draft. It always made its quota. Most of the counties in the state couldn't say that, but Delaware County did anyway, and did quite well with that many anyway. So, what the counties did if they had trouble getting enough volunteers is they offered a bounty, give you money for joining the service. Well, that was pretty good. And so they offered bounties throughout the war. Delaware County did too. I think every county in the state offered a bounty. First year, no bounty. No problems getting volunteers. The second year, Delaware County offered $25 for anyone who would serve. You think we'd get very many people today to volunteer for $25? I don't think so. I just had a luncheon bill that was a lot more than that. I know that. In the last 2 years of the war, Delaware County gave $100 to anyone who volunteered, partly because it was more difficult to get volunteers as the war went on. After the war, the county commissioners decided that wasn't a very good way. County commissioners decided, yes, we have one here, that we ought to equalize those bounties. And so if you got no bounty the first year, you got $100. If you got $25 the second, you got $75. Everybody got $100. Altogether, Delaware County spent $51,000 in bounties. 51,000 if you want anyway, so all right. Emmylou Thornborough, it's estimated that there were 1,500, and she's written a history of Indiana during the Civil War, 1,537 African Americans altogether served in the war, by her estimate anyway. So, now, the federal government gave you a whopping, if you were private, $13 a month to serve in the Army. $13 if you could get it. They got behind, they were in their arrears and paid, but that's what you were paid. The federal government gave you nothing for the families left behind, nothing, just paid the soldiers. No county, and this is where I really want to get across to you, no county in this state took care of its families left behind better than did Delaware County. I hope I can prove that to you in just a moment. Since the federal government gave no money, on the same day that we had that first company formed, that's one day after the call for troops, the city, well, it's not Indiana City, township of Muncie raised $1,200 in 20 minutes to help the families left behind. By that I mean the families who've had a husband go off to the war, or a son or sons go off to the war, they're the families left behind. The very first day, this county raised $1,200 in 20 minutes. Now, some of it was cash. Most of it was like the family had offered 200 bushels of wheat. But amazing that quickly. However, there was no systematic way to help these families left behind. It was all done by private benevolence. Enter the Ladies' Aid Society. Ladies' Aid Society came into existence to help the families left behind. That's its primary purpose, to get them cash, to get them clothing, to get them food, to get them fuel, whatever it took anyway, and they did all kinds of means to do it. You can imagine how creative these ladies were. Well, they had concerts, they had socials, they had free dinners, they had work days, they had sewing circles, whatever it took to raise money. And did they ever raise money? I read once in the Delaware County Free Press, which is the local newspaper at that time, they raised $250 at one of these events. This is Civil War times. $250, the soldiers got $13. That's a lot of money. Another time they got $500 at one of these events, and one other time I read they raised $700, probably free concert, free dinner, whatever it might be. So they took good care of them anyway. I read that newspaper sometime in 1863, I'm not quite sure when it was, but it said for the last 2 weeks, people in the county have been out in the woods, felling trees, cutting up woods, taking it to the families left behind. And then the day after Thanksgiving in 64, it said yesterday in Thanksgiving, it said virtually every able-bodied man in the county was out there cutting wood and hauling it to the families left behind. What a fantastic thing. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to, but they did anyway, so all right. Well, the Ladies' Aid Society was very concerned. Finally, the state legislature said, you know, it would be all right if the counties wanted to tax themselves to help the families left behind. That's an option. Some of the counties did it, some of the counties did not. Delaware County did. Delaware County decided to tax itself to help these families. And according to the Indiana Adjutant General's report, Delaware County raised $180,000 to help the families left behind. $180,000. Tremendous amount of money if you want anyway. Now, altogether, though, Delaware County is a small county, as Indiana counties went. Altogether, in the state of Indiana, Indiana raised $4.5 million for the families left behind, which may sound like a lot until I tell you that Indiana spent $15.5 million on bounties. 3 times as much money for bounties as for the families left behind. 3 times as much. They were so concerned about getting the volunteers that they did this. Allen County, for instance. Allen County spent $500,000 in bounties, $70,000 in money left for families left behind. Bartholomew County, down in southern part of the state, down in Columbus area, $300,000 in bounties and a woeful $20,000 for the families left behind. Now, throughout all the counties in this state, only 2 counties spent more money for the families left behind than they did for bounties. Jackson County and Delaware County. Now, I've given you the figures. Should I ask you to repeat them for me? just in case you don't remember exactly what I said, we spent $51,000 in bounties. How much did we spend on families left behind? Thank you. Good. Some of you are not sleeping. I got 180,000. That's more than 3 times as much. We spent more than 3 times as much money to help those families left behind than we did for bounties. No other county came even close to that. One other county spent twice as much, and that's all. We spent 3 times as much. We're not the biggest county. We're not the most prominent county, but no county was more concerned about the families left behind than Delaware County. And I think that makes it worth honoring, worth pleading for him. Now, yeah, that's fine. You know, I'm not from this county. I moved here. And the county is not perfect, right? Right. But it's good. It's good, and it was good then as well. Well, the Ladies' Aid Society just didn't help the soldiers of the families left behind. They also helped the soldiers. They sewed little bags called hussies, which they put in pins and buttons and needles and whatever they could to give to the soldiers. And of course, the Ladies' Aid Society fixed food for the soldiers. Jars of gel. They had eggs wrapped in oats. They had butter in wet leaves. They had pies and cakes and pickles and whatever it might be. Good intentions, horrible results. They just didn't get to the soldiers in good shape. The jars broke, the eggs cracked, the butter melted, the chicken was spoiled before it ever got to the soldiers in many cases. So they stopped that. That didn't work. But they're ingenious. Fairly early in the war, they learned of a regiment leaving Indianapolis by rail, coming through Muncie just about at noontime on the way to the east. And so they say, we can do this. We will feed them. And so once again, they buy chicken and cakes and pies and pickles and whatever, and they fed the soldiers as they came through. What I have never been able to find out, if the train ever stopped or just slowed down. But they did it more than once, and it worked quite well. Now, one other thing is, but you may know or may not know that a lot of people, particularly in the southern third of the state, were very strong Southern sympathizers. I mean, they'd come up from the south. The southern part of the state was the most populous part of the state in the 1860s. And they had a lot of Southerns. That's where Copperheadism was very strong. Obviously, Delaware County is not in the third part of the state, in the lower third. And there was very little Southern sympathy in this county as far as I can tell. I can give you several examples. I'm going to give you 2. There was a Methodist, I don't know what happens to be a Methodist, I could have picked, but this happened to be a Methodist minister who was preaching in a rural church north of Yorktown. And he said some things sympathetic to the South. And according to the newspaper, and the newspapers are never wrong, particularly 1860 newspaper. According to the newspaper, he was visited after that and told, you have 24 hours to get out of this county. And he did, and didn't come back. I'd like to know a little bit more about that, but anyway, I can't imagine you run your pastor off that fast. But anyway, they did. But the other one I have no problem at all. A traveler, a wayfarer came through into the city and began talking among a few people, praising Clement Vallandigham. Now, Vallandigham was a congressman from Ohio who had been banished from the United States by President Lincoln because of things he had said and done, and this wayfarer was praising him. Just so happened, there were a couple of soldiers home on furlough, and they quietly escorted this guy out of the county. As one person wrote, sedition in Delaware County simply was not tolerated then, and it wasn't. I could give you other examples, but that's enough anyway. In 1860, the county supported Lincoln. In 1864, they supported Lincoln again, even more so than they did the first time. So let me conclude. I think this is a county we should remember and should honor because, one, it raised 2,000 soldiers out of a population of 18. That's tremendous. And those guys fought all over the war. 365 of them gave it their lives for it. That's tremendous. This county supported the Lincoln administration through and through. They did not really allow sedition to get strong here. And then perhaps most important of all, nowhere in this state supported the people left behind more than did people of this county. It's a county we should honor. Thank you.
We're going to give Bill an American flag as a thank you for his speaking today. It is not up here, but we will get it to you.
Promises,
We
promises.
promise, and thank you very much for your kind words.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. None of this would have been possible without our sponsors. At the Eagle level, the City of Muncie, WLBC, WERK, MAX, WXFN. At the Stars level, WIPB. And at the Stripes level, Star Rocket Media and Westminster Village. There are others down below there that contributed as well. And please, if you happen to be in one of their locations, thank them for their generous donations to our organization. It went to a good cause. We are next going to have a rifle salute. Please stand. You may be seated. If you have purchased a ribbon, we have people at the white tent that can help you locate that ribbon in that field out there. It really behooves you to find them because it's a lot of searching otherwise. I have several Exchange Club members that have said they would try to get out there and assist you in locating where your ribbon might be. If you'd like to purchase a flag or a ribbon, there are also people out there that can meet that need as well. If I could have Exchange, let me start over. If I could have Exchange Club members, as we are dismissing, please move toward the tent so that we can see how many we have, okay? I thank you for your time. I thank you for your patriotism. And most of all, I thank you for pointing out to those of us that are here to witness the members of our society that have made all of our lives so much better. You may notice black ribbons on some of the flags at the entrance of the field. These are police officers and firemen who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our community. The postlude concert is by the Muncie Central Wind Ensemble and all. Please walk through the flags. It's very moving. Have a good day.